What occurs when treachery replaces love? What occurs when months of meticulously cultivated trust are destroyed by unintended lies? This isn't just another breakup on reality TV. This is the tale of Matt Branis and Jasmine Pineda. A tale that started with marital aspirations, ended with heartache, and descended into an unanticipated scandal. This narrative has it all. From cautious approaches to public humiliation, from covert affairs to a financial scandal worth $500,000. Indeed you heard correctly. Matt Branis informed Jasmine Pineda straight out that he couldn't marry her when she proposed. They got into a heated dispute as a result. Eventually they both made a heartbreaking conclusion. Matt Branis and Jasmine Pineda formally parted ways. A secret was later discovered. For the past year, Matt Branis had been unfaithful to Jasmine Pineda. He had lied to her and had spent a year in surreptitiously having a romantic relationship with a young woman named Elizabeth. Numerous people reported seeing Matt Branis a number of occasions in various eateries. However, he wasn't by himself. He was with Elizabeth, his covert lover. That was not the end of the story. Matt Branis allegedly borrowed $500,000 from Jasmine Pineda, but he squandered all of the borrowed funds on internet gambling. Matt Branis denied ever borrowing the money when Jasmine Pineda asked him to repay it. Jasmine Pineda finally looked to the court. She accused Matt Branis of slander and embezzlement in her complaint. The court condemned Matt Branis to 1 year in a prison. We reveal the startling truth today. The tale of Matt Branis and Jasmine Pineda. 4 years, 90-day Fiancé's cameras had been following Jasmine Pineda. She was characterized by her fans as fiery, passionate, erratic, and always truthful when it came to love. She desired a future. She desired safety. She also desired a marriage that would ultimately demonstrate the value of her struggles with love. Matt Branis was the next. He wasn't a cast member for very long. Actually, when he came into Jasmine's life, a lot of his admirers felt that he was more composed and grounded. Where Jasmine was exploding with emotion, Matt appeared solid, reasonable, almost protective. They appeared to many to be opposites that complemented one another. Jasmine had been dreaming of a long-term relationship for months. Marriage rumors weren't merely wishful thinking. They were authentic. She had hinted at it on social media and told her family and friends. The next logical step for Jasmine was to make a proposition. Here's the twist though. Jasmine didn't hold off till Matt asked her. In a moment that would stun spectators, she proposed to him. Picture the scene. Calm night. The ring was picked with care. Jasmine's voice was tremulous yet determined as she looked straight into Matt's eyes. "I want to live the rest of our lives together, Matt," she remarked. "Are you going to wed me?" Silence hung thick in the room. Matt's face remained expressionless. There was no glee in his eyes. Instead, the moment was abruptly shattered by what he said. "I can't marry you. Not quite yet. Not one day." Not even hesitation. It was a rejection. Straightforward. Unambiguous. Brutal. The ensuing quiet was not captured by the cameras. It was like ice splitting into a million pieces, according to individuals close to the pair. Jasmine's heart was crushed, not simply damaged. The ensuing argument was explosive. Words are hurled like blades. "He wasted Jasmine's time," she said. Matt said she put pressure on him. The marital fantasy vanished in a tempest of rage, sorrow, and incredulity. The neighbors. Remember the yelling that evening. Jasmine's abrupt social media absence was observed by friends. There was a problem and it couldn't be fixed. Consequently, the two made a heartbreaking decision that would surprise fans. They were finished. Matt Branis and Jasmine Pineda formally parted ways. But as devastating as that moment was, what Jasmine didn't know was that the rejection wasn't only about fear of commitment. Secrets were at issue. Matt has been keeping secrets for more than a year. The proposal was over. Amid calamity, an explosion of sadness had replaced what should have been a pivotal moment of love. The days following Matt's rejection were quiet for Jasmine Pineda. A sort of quiet that shouts more loudly than words. She was rejected in front of everyone who mattered after sharing her heart with the world on television. Jasmine was regarded as upset by her close friends. She ceased taking calls. Her flamboyant personality cooled. Even her social. The media, which is typically characterized by strong posts and witty captions, became quiet. Matt Branis, meanwhile, moved in a different way. Jasmine was grieving, but he wasn't. In public, he wasn't spinning. He seems almost relieved instead. He was serene, as if a burden had been removed from his shoulders, according to those who saw him in the days after the divorce. But there was something Matt was concealing behind that serene veneer. Fans of 90 Day Fiancé went crazy on the internet when they learned about the split. Jasmine had consistently been a contentious character on the program. Her fiery honesty was adored by some. Nearly everyone felt that her public rejection was humiliating, but others criticized her emotional outbursts. Fan pages shared snippets of the proposal. The audience argued over whether Matt was merely honest or heartless. While some claimed Matt had led her on, others believed Jasmine had pushed him too much. No one outside of their inner group, however, was aware that the split was due to more than marital difficulties. It had to do with something more sinister. Jasmine was also around. To find out what's true, Jasmine made an effort to put herself back together in the weeks following their breakup. She spent time with friends, depended on her family, and attempted to convince herself that the relationship had just run its course. But she was plagued by questions late at night. Why would Matt be so stern when he said no? What made him appear so composed, almost aloof, as though he had already moved on? She was surprised by how quickly the replies arrived. Matt wasn't the one who initially hinted at betrayal. They originated with foreigners. A admirer claimed to have observed Matt dining with another woman in a private message to Jasmine. Jasmine initially dismissed it. They were, after all, split up. Perhaps Matt just wanted to get on with his life. However, the murmurs became more intense. Others stepped forward. They talked about Matt with the same woman in pubs and restaurants. The name that would throw Jasmine into a tailspin then appeared. Elizabeth. Elizabeth was a young woman, untried and unheard of. Witnesses, however, claim that she wasn't a new character in the life of Matt. Maybe longer than Jasmine ever imagined. She has been there for a long time. Matt denied everything when Jasmine confronted him about it. He passed it off as rumors, jealous fans, online chatter. She was being dramatic and neurotic, he informed her. Rejection could never pierce her as deeply as those words did. Jasmine's intuition, however, warned her otherwise, and it would turn out to be correct. Rejection was just the start of the heartache. There was still the betrayal of lies to come to light. As Jasmine found the truth about Elizabeth, the world around Matt Branis would start to implode. Another woman's murmurs had become too loud to ignore. Jasmine initially held on to the belief that the rumors were merely that. Rumors. Perhaps Matt was spotted with a pal. Fans may have exaggerated. Perhaps she was overanalyzing, as he frequently charged her with. But her heart knew deep down. And the reality was going to hit her harder than she could have ever guessed. Jasmine got a message one evening. From a fan she had never even met in person. It was more than words. It was a picture. Her heart stopped when she saw the grainy, dimly lit picture that was taken from across a restaurant. A woman with long dark hair was seated across from Matt. They weren't merely consuming food. Across the table, they were holding hands and laughing in a way that begged for closeness. She wasn't a new acquaintance. Elizabeth was her name. Jasmine was initially incredulous. Hours passed while she gazed at the picture, her thoughts whirling. It might have been old. It might have been innocent. However, the puzzle came together when additional photos from various restaurants and dates appeared. This was nothing new. This was no joke. There had been a covert romance going on here. The horror of the truth became apparent as Jasmine continued to investigate. Elizabeth wasn't simply someone Matt had met after their breakup. She had been in the picture for over a year. 1 year. This meant that as Jasmine was making plans for their future, while she was giving up everything for their relationship, Matt was already leading 2 lives, and she was discussing marriage offers. It was then verified by friends that Matt and Elizabeth had been spotted together months prior to their split. Some even argued that he couldn't commit to someone when his heart and loyalty were already elsewhere, which is why he rejected Jasmine's proposal so harshly. This discovery was more than just betrayal to Jasmine. It was humiliation. The denial had been unpleasant. However, it was intolerable to realize that she had been in a competition with a ghost the entire time, a covert romance that was in full view. Matt was unable to refute it when Jasmine faced him once more, this time with pictures in hand. There was no denying the reality. The fight was explosive. Later, neighbors reported hearing hours of shouting. Heartbreak and rage splintered Jasmine's voice. Cornered, Matt attempted to defend himself. Elizabeth, he said, knew him better. That Jasmine possessed. Been too passionate, demanding and overbearing. But Jasmine didn't care about what he said. There was no justification. She had shown him sacrifice, devotion and love. And in return, he had given her lies. The already broken relationship was now reduced to ashes. There was anarchy in the fan community as rumors of Elizabeth spread. Social media was ablaze with arguments. Elizabeth was who? What was the duration of this? Was Matt unfaithful to Jasmine over his whole 90-day fiancé stint? Some supporters stood up for Jasmine, furiously, calling her the victim of Matt's deception. Her passion was faulted by others, who said Matt had only sought tranquility elsewhere. But one thing was true regardless of the stance they took. The woman who had once been willing to give him everything had lost faith in Matt Branis. Elizabeth's truth was more than just a scandal. It was the start of a bigger breakdown. Because Jasmine and Matt shared something more than just love and loyalty. Money. And the subsequent disclosure would turn a broken heart into a legal war. However, one thing was evident before we arrived. Everything had altered after Matt and Elizabeth had an affair. Jasmine was no longer merely upset. She was prepared to defend herself. Secrets are delicate. For a while, Matt Branis had been able to keep his affair with Elizabeth under wraps through peaceful times behind closed doors, private dinners and late-night meetings. However, secrets have a way of getting lost, and Matt's secret was about to come to light. Began, quite innocently, while dining in downtown Miami. A 90-day fiancé fan reported seeing Matt in the corner of her eatery. He wasn't by himself. Elizabeth was with him. The fan didn't think much of it at first. Might have been business. Might have been family. However, it became evident that this was not business when they saw how Elizabeth laughed, how Matt leaned in, and how their hands touched across the table. Intimacy was what this was. More stories soon came flooding in. Waiters at hip restaurants, couples on date nights. Even those walking along the street had the same story. Matt Branis wasn't single and he wasn't faithful. He was frequently spotted with the same woman. Elizabeth was no longer merely a rumor. She was everywhere and she was real. Images started to appear. Initially grainy cell phone photos, followed by sharper pictures. Elizabeth and Matt lean against his car, converse like lovers, have wine at a rooftop bar, and stroll hand in hand through malls. The web sprang into action. Mirrors posted images to forums for gossip, Instagram fan sites, and Reddit. The story changed in a matter of weeks. Jasmine was more than just devastated. Someone had betrayed her. Some even rewatched prior 90-day fiancé recordings, highlighting instances in which Matt appeared emotionally distant, preoccupied, or aloof. Some said he was already with Elizabeth. He never intended to wed Jasmine because of this. The whispers from the public were like knives to Jasmine. Private treachery was no longer the only thing involved. It was broadcast of humiliation for the world to analyze. Imagine having strangers examine your heartbreak while you browse the internet. strangers verifying in pictures what you've been afraid of for months. Each image of Matt and Elizabeth together was a fresh wound. One more reminder that Matt had been leading a double life while Jasmine had been fighting for love. Under the spotlight of public rumors, her dignity, pride, and trust were all taken away. The fan base became divided. In her responses, Team Jasmine poured forth messages of assistance. They informed her that Matt had made the worst decision of his life, that she was strong, and that she deserved more. In response, Team Matt contended that Jasmine was too demanding, too controlling, and too unstable to retain a man. They maintained that Elizabeth was his true bliss, his haven, and his source of tranquility. One thing was certain despite the online opinion battle. The affair had come to light. Everyone knew it. Jasmine's sadness turned to rage as the sightings increased. It was more than just love. No longer. This was an unforgivable level of contempt, deceit, and betrayal. However, neither the fans nor Jasmine were aware that the situation was going to get even more sinister. Because there was financial treachery concealed behind the betrayal of love. A treachery worth $500,000. And the world would view Matt Branis entirely differently after that reality was revealed. Love and betrayal sting deeply. However, the wounds caused by betrayal and trust, as well as betrayal and money, are permanent. Regarding Jasmine Pineda, it was upsetting to learn of Matt's involvement with Elizabeth. She couldn't have been ready for the following discovery though. Her heart wasn't simply broken by Matt. And he had ruined her finances. Like the affair, it started with murmurs. However, it wasn't fans who were whispering this time. They were sent straight from Jasmine. Jasmine claimed that Matt Branis had borrowed $500,000 from her in a tearful conversation with close friends that was later verified by court records. $500,000. Type of money that doesn't simply disappear. The type of money that stands for trust, savings, and sacrifice. Jasmine believed she was investing in a future with the guy she loved, so she worked hard to get the money. She hadn't just handed him the cash. She had trusted him. He informed her that he required it for future business prospects, financial security, and their joint future. Blinded by love, Jasmine gave it to him. However, the reality was more sinister than she had thought. The money was not invested by Matt. He did not construct their future. He took a chance. Jasmine's hard-earned funds were being whirled away night after night by virtual roulette wheels, poker tables, sports betting, and internet casinos. It was already too late when she became aware of what was happening. The funds had vanished. Careless addiction cost $500,000. As surprising as the betrayal itself was Matt's response when Jasmine confronted him about the missing money. He disputed it. Vehemently denied ever taking out the loan. He accused her of lying, exaggerating, and attempting to undermine his reputation. He asserted that she was fabricating tales due to heartache. Jasmine, however, had evidence. Records, messages, and bank transfers that described the loss of confidence. And Matt lost his anger when she persisted. Their altercations become more ugly. One wound was the romance with Elizabeth. Another was the money. In Jasmine's opinion, they committed an unspeakable crime together. The story blew up out of control when the fan community learned about the $500,000 loan. Fans were discussing more than simply love these days. They were discussing fraud. The tabloids jumped in and raised questions like, did Matt really take the money? Did Jasmine willingly give it? Was this a toxic love story or a calculated scam? Stories about financial disaster, addiction, and betrayal dominated the headlines. Matt's reputation as a reliable and composed companion has changed to that of a liar. This was no longer only about heartbreak for Jasmine. Justice was at issue. She was mortified by the affair with Elizabeth. However, it was inexcusable that $500,000 had been stolen. Jasmine Pineda took a stand. She would do more than simply post about Matt on social media. She would go to court with him. What had started out as a promise of eternity had now turned into a court battle. Additionally, Matt Branis would have to deal with repercussions in the courts that no camera crew could shield him from. Addiction ruins more than simply finances. It ruins reputations, relationships, trust, and occasionally entire lives. The reality about Matt Branis's gambling was more than just a covert hobby. All of this was driven by the black spiral. The deception, the denial, the treachery, and finally the confrontation in court. Long before Elizabeth came into the scene, Matt had been leading a secret life behind closed doors. During the day, he acted as a cool-headed companion. He chased the adrenaline of internet wagers, slot machines, blackjack tables, and sports earnings by night while he sat transfixed to luminous displays. Jasmine's money was his lifeline, and the internet was his casino. It began modestly. There are a few thousand here and a few hundred there. However, Matt always thought the next win would make all the difference, just like any gambler stuck in the cycle. Rather, each click sank him more deeply into falsehoods and debt. The first indications for Jasmine were rumors of strange transactions, strange charges on bank records, and missing money that didn't add up. She wanted to believe him at first. The man she loved, Matt, had a plan, or so she hoped. However, the reality emerged when the sums increased to tens of thousands and ultimately hundreds of thousands. Was indisputable. Matt has no plans to save for the future. Their future was being gambled away by him. Jasmine anticipated regret when she addressed him. At the very least, she anticipated a glimmer of guilt. Rather, she received denial. Matt's remarks were as sharp as glass. That money was never borrowed by me. It's all in your head. You're attempting to destroy me because I broke up with you. He refused to take responsibility even after being shown with proof, such as bank transfers in his name and messages between them attesting to the loans. This wasn't to Jasmine merely treachery. It was gaslighting. They were telling her that her pain wasn't genuine. Her confidence was intact. She still had $500,000. Matt's denial, however, went beyond simple conceit. It was desperate. He was engulfed by his addiction by that point. He required additional funds, wagers, and opportunities to recoup his losses. Later, France exposed that he was taking from others, making unfulfilled promises, and fabricating stories to hide the lies that were being told. The pattern continued on until Jasmine eventually said, "Sufficient." As word got out about his gaming, Matt's reputation started to fall apart. His once supportive fans have turned away. His image of composure and reason crumbled under the scandal. He was remembered as the one who gambled away love, wealth, and dignity rather than as the one who resisted Jasmine's intensity. The line had been crossed for Jasmine. She would never be able to go past the hurt caused by the affair with Elizabeth. The money, however, was a completely different matter. Not only her pride was at issue, or her heart. It was her future, her means of subsistence. She then readied herself to do the one thing Matt never imagined she would. She brought him before the judge. The woman who had been standing in front of Matt holding a quivering ring was now standing in front of him holding legal papers. The romance was over. The scandal was still going strong. And the following chapter would unfold in a courtroom in front of the law, not in eateries or fan sites. Heartbreak occurs when love fails. However, when funds disappear and reputations are. Love stories don't simply end when they're destroyed. They become conflicts. Jasmine Pineda had already reached her breaking point due to the sorrow of rejection and treachery. However, the revelation that $500,000 of her money had been lost to gambling by Matt Branis stoked an uncontrollable fire. Romance was no longer the only factor here. Justice was at issue here. Everyone was astonished by Jasmine's next step. She wasn't the only one who pointed out mine to Matt. She did not only vent to her admirers or friends. She strode directly inside the legal system. 2 damaging allegations were made in her complaint against Matt Branis. The first is embezzlement. The allegation that Matt defrauded her of her money by claiming it was for their future while squandering it all on gaming. Secondly, slander. Matt was accused of lying both in public and personally when confronted, portraying Jasmine as unstable and dishonest in order to hide his own wrongdoings. Jasmine characterized herself in her court filing as a victim of deliberate dishonesty as well as a lady deceived in love. She described the bank in detail. Messages, the transfers, and the assurances Matt had given. It all comes together to create a manipulative image. The mood was electrifying when the case made it to court. Reporters, fans, and interested bystanders crowded the room, ready to see the drama that had jumped from reality TV to a real-life controversy. Jasmine entered with a confident demeanor. She had changed from pleading with Matt to marry her. Calm, aggressive, and resolute, she was a fighter. Matt, meanwhile, seemed aloof, almost contemptuous. His attorneys contended that the funds had been presents rather than loans. They fabricated Jasmine's account to discredit him following their split, claiming she was resentful. However, Jasmine had proof, and proof never lies. Her attorneys showed the bank transfers and receipts one by one, which showed significant amounts shifting from Jasmine's account to Matt's. Screenshots showed gambling websites connected to Matt's personal accounts, and texts in which he promised to reimburse her when the investments were successful. Like a hammer, each piece of evidence broke down Matt's defense brick by brick. Once tight with uncertainty, the courtroom started to change. The air was filled with gasps. The story was evolving. It was not Jasmine who was the unstable ex. She fell prey to deceit and betrayal. Jasmine's testimony was compelling when she took the stand. Sometimes her voice broke, but her determination never faltered. She talked about how she had put her faith in Matt, trusted him with her future, and was ashamed to discover that he was not just unfaithful but also careless with her sacrifices. Her words created a picture of survival, treachery, and heartache. In comparison, Matt's testimony lacked conviction. He denied the charges, but the overwhelming amount of evidence disproved his denial. He was deceived even by his body language. He was struggling with facts, shifting in his seat, and avoiding eye contact. The trial was more than just a court case. It was a scene, the last confrontation between two people whose romance had fallen apart. This provided Jasmine with closure. This was exposure for Matt. And the world waited with keen anticipation as the trial came to an end. Take a breath. Would justice eventually catch up with Matt, or would he get away with it? The judge readied himself to render the decision. Anticipation weighed heavily on the courtroom's silence. With her hands clasped and her gaze fixated on the bench, Jasmine sat erect. When the moment of truth came, Matt, who was pale and anxious, fidgeted. Their lives would be forever altered by the judge's subsequent remarks. The verdict day finally came. The courtroom had been a battleground for weeks. Arguments between attorneys, mountains of evidence, and heightened emotions. However, the storm was coming to an end. And in its stead, a final ruling would determine Matt Briss and Jasmine Pineda's destiny. Strict and methodical, the judge started reading the ruling, with every syllable laden with meaning. His voice reverberated around the quiet courtroom. The evidence on the embezzlement charge was unambiguous. The narrative was consistent throughout the gambling accounts, text conversations, and bank transfers. In fact, Matt had taken Jasmine's money with the intention of securing their future, but instead squandered carelessly. The testimony on the defamation accusation was equally damning. Jasmine's reputation and mental health had been damaged by Matt's persistent denials and his public attempts to paint her as unstable and dishonest. The judge